Hello, and welcome to Information Please. I'm here today, I might introduce myself. My name is Mimi Ernst, and I am the Executive Secretary of the Columbus Area Arts Council. And I am here today really for three reasons. One, I want to tell you about my special guest that you're going to meet in a minute, Mr. Dale Nichols. And I want to tell you more details about his art exhibit that is now on display in the lower level of the Columbus City Library. And our third reason for being with you today is to give you a demonstration of some of Dale Nichols' artwork actually being created right here in front of the camera. So, knowing who we are and why we're here, I want to introduce you all to my very special guest, Mr. Dale Nichols, who is with us today to tell us about his life and to tell us about his style of painting and how art was his life. And Dale, tell us right now, let's start with something familiar. Tell us where you're living now and how you've kind of come full circle in that community.
Well, where I'm living right at the moment is my hometown, David City.
David City.
Nebraska.
Yes.
It's never gotten away from me,
Sure.
you know.
You were born in David City?
I was born near Foley, which is 5 miles out of town.
And am I right, 1907? Something like that? You were born about 1907?
Are you trying to find out how old I am?
No, I'm not. I'm not in any way. Well, tell us.
I was born in 1904. That was exactly just 1 year after the Wright brothers sailed their plane.
And were you a farm boy?
I was very much a farm boy, thank heavens. Because if I hadn't been, I would never have been able to be an artist.
And why is that?
That's because if you don't know anything about natural law and how nature works, you can't make a picture of anything that has nature in it because you won't know what to do. So I was born with corn fields and oats and that sort of thing. And then, of course, the beautiful plants on well, we'll say trees. And I was able to understand that in making a painting, you see, you can't just make an image of something, and if you want to do it that way, get a camera. But you have to go beyond the camera to make a painting. You have to get into the depths of how that plant grew. You have to know what it looked like and it was the seed.
And you saw all that day in and day out.
I saw all of it and lived every bit of it, and what I loved so much was to lay on my little tummy when I was a little child, playing with box elder bugs. And I couldn't kill anything, you know, anything. I just stood in awe of these little creatures.
And you studied them, observed them, and that's
Studied.
your eye.
I was in love with nature and the mystery of nature. I was in love with all this mysterious thing going on around me.
Well,
it's still that way.
In spite of all that, I bet you had some work to do on the farm too.
Oh, well, I had to be naturally a farm boy. According to my age, you see. Now, for instance, when I was just a little boy, I was able then to handle the one horse that pulled up the thing for stacking hay.
Oh, yes.
But the older men, you see, were actually stacking the hay, and they were of course running machines. But I could handle one horse and take the signal and raise the big thing up like that, and then dump it until I got to the point where I could then do something a little more heavier.
Certainly. You had brothers and sisters that grew up with you. Can you?
I had 2 brothers that were 10 and 12 years older than me.
Oh,
So I had a sister that was 2 years younger.
You were the third child of 4.
And so I was alone.
Yeah.
And they used to tease me a lot. Daily as a baby, toodle-doo-doo-doo. And I'd be crying and running to the house.
All those things. But now, did you get an early education at a country school then, or?
Yes, East Olive School was about 2 miles away.
And you had to walk, I suppose.
I had to walk through the farmers' fields and be careful that there was no bull that might be around. But I had to, again, you see, I had to walk across fields and climb over fences and that sort of thing. And then, of course, in the summertime, maybe run across a big bull snake or something that would yet be running. They're harmless, but nevertheless, I didn't know that.
Sure.
And so it was a rather exciting world.
I'm sure it was. I can imagine in the country you were surrounded by nature everywhere.
Oh,
Big sky
everywhere.
and lots of earth and
Oh,
growing
yes.
things.
Oh, yes.
And I know all those things are part of your art.
Oh, absolutely.
Part of your life.
Absolutely. It's if I hadn't known, you see, as much as I can about natural law, and I couldn't possibly have been the artist that I am. One of my great friends in my life was Frank Lloyd Wright, the architect. And we used to talk about it. And he told me that he was born and reared on a farm up in Wisconsin. And that it had helped him so much to be able to understand how roses and flowers grew and that sort of thing. It helped him in his architecture. He said, if you don't know anything about nature's laws, you can't be an architect, you can't be an artist, Dale.
So it's your education in art did not come from a textbook.
Oh,
It came
no.
From living it every day.
It came from living it and curiosity.
Sure. Did you have an early interest in art as a young man?
My mother said that she gave me a pencil with a spool on the end of it so I couldn't hurt my eyes perhaps, and I'd lay on my stomach on the floor with a piece of paper she'd put down and hold it in my wrist and make circles and squeal.
Enjoy it.
2 years old.
2 years old, right. That's very
I
exciting.
just squeal. No, just making no drawings, nothing like that. Just
the joy
marks.
of making something, that's right. We have on display, you have an entire gallery full of paintings that represent your lifetime of work, and they're on display now at the Columbus Art Gallery. And 3 of them, I think, are very unique, and the children who have visited here have enjoyed those paintings. They were done, the sign says that they were done sometime before you were 16 years old, and you didn't own a paintbrush.
No,
How did you paint those?
I did it with my fingers. I had to put the paint on and rub it like this. You see,
Finger painting.
one of my great friends was John Hossick. John Hossick, and his son was one of my teachers, you know. And Otto Hossick is the teacher. Gave me 1 hour a day just to make art.
In school?
in
Did
grade
you do
school.
that? Oh, that's wonderful.
And his father had given me a paint set that his own children didn't seem to have the interest in doing it. And I didn't know that art paints came in tubes. And I didn't know about that, and there were no brushes. So I put the very first painting I made with that, I did it with my fingers.
That's exciting.
And it was a copy of a picture that was made by one of the United States fine painters. I can't recall his name, he wasn't that famous, but he'd painted the mountain, the Holy Cross. And the amount of the Holy Cross is still there if you want to see it sometime, and I don't know exactly, you'd have to find out where to go. It was a matter, you see, of some areas in the mountain itself, you see, where snow would build up, and it happened to be built up in the shape of a cross.
Yes, right. So, and that is captured on canvas by you at a very early age, before you even owned a paintbrush.
I think I was not more than maybe 14 or 15 years old.
That's exciting. Well, now you left David City actually to pursue an art career in Chicago.
In 1924. Now, because this whole show is dedicated to my very fine grandfather, my mother's father, who came from Hanover, Germany. He was a German, and he was, of course, educated in Germany. And so he knew more about the arts, you might say, than most of the people that I had that could help me. And he told me I had to go to Chicago, that's where the printers were, because I'd have to get into the type of thing that we'd see in the newspapers or magazines.
He knew that was the way to make a living if you were going to be an artist, no doubt.
So it was his urging that made my mother and my father realize that since I was not cut out to be a farmer, chicken-hearted and all that, you see, I wanted everything to stay alive, you know. So they were willing to send me. I could only have just a summer course. And my mother told me, if you don't get a job after the 2 months are over, you have to come home.
And you did get a job.
I got a job, and I was putting pieces of paper and cardboard in both of my shoes because I'd worn out the soles of the shoes.
Yes.
And I was dressed well because I always liked nice clothing. So I had some tailor-made suits to go with me to Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked like a Chicagoan.
Mm-hmm.
But I was a farm boy from there.
Sure. But you looked the part, huh?
I looked the part.
Sure.
So finally, little by little, you see, I got into a calendar company,
Mm-hmm.
just doing lettering, that's all.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't do any pictures yet. So just working and
Mm-hmm.
on Sundays and Saturdays. And
Well, I think it's interesting to share or emphasize to our listeners, too, as you told me before the cameras were turned on, that your 2 months of schooling that summer, the very first summer you left David City, were have been the only formal
That's
art
all I
training
ever-
that you've ever had.
that's all I ever had.
Which is amazing. You are totally to me, that would be
Well,
self-taught in every way.
I got the education I needed by going to the field museums. There were 2 of them,
Mm-hmm.
and also the Chicago Art Institute,
Mm-hmm.
just to look.
Yes. Spent a lot
No
of time
study,
there
just look.
looking. Mm-hmm.
And I know when I stood in some of the field museum pictures, you know, that they'd gotten from the Orient, China,
Mm-hmm.
and of course Japan. And I would have a pad of paper, and I was absolutely astounded. I thought, how in the world can I ever possibly be this good?
Mm-hmm.
So I was educated by vision. That's
Mhm.
just what, looking
Yes, looking.
at Japanese and Chinese mostly.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's a little bit of a simplicity like a Japanese or Chinese, it came from the field museums
Sure.
in Chicago.
By just observing. Do you know, I think that's a wonderful point that you brought out, because in our own schools here in Columbus, we have a new art curriculum, and aesthetic scanning is one of the exercises that children do, and it's simply looking at a painting and noticing more about it. Being able to look at the cool colors or warm colors, what kind of lines there are, looking at the symmetry, and it's a kind of an evaluation sheet that kids do when they look at art, and it's to teach them to see more. And I know some of our young people think, why do we have to do this? This doesn't have anything to do with art, but from just what you said, that's what taught you, you feel like,
Yes.
the talent that you have by
Sure.
looking.
By looking entirely. And then, of course, none of the Japanese was everything strictly realistic ever. The Chinese was the other way around.
Very
It was
realistic.
very, very realistic.
Right. Do you know, it's a good point to comment on modern art and your opinion about modern art. Will you share with us your feelings about abstract art, minimalism, all these new trends?
I have nothing at all against any kind of form of art as long as it's not political. You see, so much of this stuff that came out as modern art in Paris, you know, came from Russia. And it was definitely done to use a type of psychology to undermine maybe Christianity, that sort of thing.
Propaganda.
They would take maybe a picture that would feature maybe a fish which would represent Jesus, and then they would chop it up like that and call it that, but almost by that name. And it was a new way of looking.
Right.
But they're actually destroying. The Eiffel Tower was one of those that was made into just a complete wreck in a picture. And they called it Cubist art. You see, Cubist art, if you use it to a steak, is chopping the steak up. And of course, these fellows had it tongue-in-cheek, and they were having some fun doing it.
And now we've
So they
named
would
it a
chop
whole
up the
era.
Eiffel Tower and call it by the name and sort of cover up what they were really doing.
Sure. And
But I
your own
understand.
art is not part of that style.
Never.
Never.
I will not paint a picture that isn't obedient to natural law. I will not paint a picture that doesn't make you want to maybe do something like that yourself. It has to be an inspiration. I will not paint a picture that is not inspiring. I will not do it.
And you base your painting
And
on
I will-
the laws of nature.
Nor will I ever make a critical statement against anything that is absolutely necessary for our life. I will not be anything like that, ever. And I was told in Chicago by some of the artists that are going a little bit more toward the modern, And they'd say, well, one over my shoulder, so, well, just how pretty can you get it, Dale? I said, I don't know. I'm going to try harder the next time.
To get it pretty?
That made it even more so.
Yes.
They thought if you made anything that was pleasant and beautiful, you know, why it wasn't really good art.
Sure. Yeah. Tongue-in-cheek, yes.
I would just hand it back. Well, I'll try my best. I'll try to make it more attractive the next time around. They really thought that if you had something attractive, it wasn't really so good. I said, what's the idea of just making something, trying to make it shocking and ugly? What's the purpose? Because these fellows were not political. They really had the idea that you had to have something that was sort of, I suppose, made you a little bit, repelled you a little bit, but I wouldn't do it.
Certainly. Well, your paintings have stood the test of time over the years, are as popular now as they were when you painted them. So
well,
the laws of nature don't change, and
not at all. If it doesn't obey nature's rules, forget it.
Right. I enjoyed reading this little pamphlet that is available to anyone who does visit the Columbus Art Gallery. It's a short biography. In fact, it says Dale Nichols, a brief account of his career. And I knew that you were very prolific in your artwork and nationally recognized, but it was fun for me to read these paragraphs that did name specifically your achievements, and I'd like to share these with people. And if I'm leaving something out, please add in. But you were, after your schooling in Chicago, you stayed around that area. You were the art editor of the Encyclopedia Britannica, and you did follow Grant Wood in that particular job. So you knew him as a contemporary and friend of yours?
Well, yes, but I mean, I did not, I don't want anyone to say that I followed Grant Wood in style or anything like that.
No, but he just had the job before you.
Grant Wood, his first letter he ever wrote to me, he said, I don't know how in the world you can stand to live in a city like Chicago. Why don't you get out on a farm? You see? But he didn't, you see, I wasn't painting farms from the camera point of view. I was painting farms because of the natural law that was in it. And I was not taking pictures of anything just because it was, well, maybe a picture I wanted to make. I wanted to get into how the things in the pictures were made, and then follow those along. That's Frank Lloyd Wright.
Yes,
that's not Grant Wood.
Sure, not Grant Wood. Your style and his you're a regionalist, but I think your styles are different. But you did know him. He was a peer, contemporary of yours. And people know his name, and I think it's nice that we think of you two together, although different in your painting styles.
Well, he had his own style, of course. However, the director of the Wichita Art Museum wrote me a letter one time and told me he had traced Grant Wood as well as George O'Keeffe and a number of other artists who had definitely been influenced by me. He had traced it. Because at a certain time when Wood and of course he was head of the jury that gave me my prize at the Art Institute. But that was the end of the hunt that he had picked. It was after that, when the popularity of it, he began to then do, according to this gentleman of the Wichita Art Museum, be sort of following my style of thinking.
That's interesting.
He actually did a little change and got away from the satire. And George O'Keeffe did the same.
Did the same.
She was from Wisconsin, you know. And so it's rather interesting. I didn't know that until this gentleman, the head of the Wichita Art Museum, he noticed it and saw it.
That's interesting to know. You were not only the art editor of the Encyclopedia Britannica, but you were the Carnegie Professor of Art by appointment at the University of Illinois. And I know you did that for several years. And there are wonderful pictures in here of students attending some of your studios. And
well, about the other now, you see, the Carnegie proposition, you see, I was ill in my youth, and I got out of high school when I was 20 years old. And I did not want to go 4 more years. I wanted to get into art quickly because I should have been a little healthier. So let me see now. That was.
We were talking about how you were appointed, actually,
Oh, yes. Yes.
as the Carnegie Professor at
Yes,
the
that's
University
right.
of Illinois.
Well, first of all, Dean Rexford Newcomb at the University of Illinois, down southern Illinois, he had written to me and told me that they had thought that my type of painting was the kind that they'd like to have taught down at the university, and would I accept the idea of being head of the art group down there. I told him I'd be very, very honored to do so, and he wanted me to come down to see him. And he was quite a wonderful fellow, and he gave me a piece of paper to fill out. And I went back to see, and I filled out the paper, and the first questions was, what university did you study at, and how were your college degrees? I didn't have any.
No.
So I had to let him know that. And then he telephoned me then. He said, well, it was quite a shock because we know you're good enough, but we have to follow the rules.
Yes.
But he said, I'm sorry that we just couldn't do it. I said, well, now don't worry about it. I understand entirely. Well, it was 2 weeks more before I heard from him again.
And they actually were able to have you be a professor because you were an honored
He said that we
honorary professor.
finally decided that we knew you were good enough, so we went to Carnegie. Carnegie did a complete survey of your career and now have appointed you as a Carnegie visiting professor. Will you accept it?
And everyone could...
So I became a Carnegie visiting professor out of Dave City High School.
Yes. And how many years were you at the University of Illinois? As a,
the university? That was only for 2 semesters, the fall and then that was that. There was a lot of criticism. You see, they had Harvard and Yale only in the art department. And I noticed one day that there seemed to be a little bit of I could see a little bit of something wrong, a little bit of anger. So I asked the dean of that particular department, I said, do your faculty here sort of object to me being not a college man and still in this position? Oh, well, yes, Professor Nichols. I said, well, I think it's rather sorry. I'm sad to hear about it. Well, I wouldn't worry about it if I were you. Well, I went to Dean Newcomb, then the head of and I said, Mr. Newcomb, have you ever had an exhibition of your artists here, your teachers in Chicago? No, he said, I don't think we have. I said, it's terrible. It's only 134 miles away, and you've never had a showing of their art, which is excellent? No. I said, do you mind if I see if I can have it done? Well, if you think you can. I said, well, yes, I think I can. So I went with Finley Galleries, where I knew Mr. Finley very well. And I told him, I said, I don't suppose you'll sell anything, and I don't even know if it's for sale, but every one of the 4 newspapers are going to really give you the biggest publicity you ever had in your life. And he did it. I was a hero after that.
That's wonderful. Well, we better, earlier you just mentioned the end of the hunt, and we want to talk on camera today, share some of your paintings with the people. And this particular painting, this is a print, actually, and it's hanging in the Columbus Art Gallery this month. And the original is hanging in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. But we are delighted to be able to have this particular print to show you. And it does have a sister painting to it also that I think we want to bring on camera now. And the nice camera lady that's helping us is Elaine Norton. Thank you, Elaine. This painting is very typical, of course, of your work. It does show us your realism, that you do follow the laws of nature, and it is now currently owned by Boys Town.
Yes.
And
Paul Flanagan was one of my great friends. And when I found out he didn't have any pictures, I gave him this one.
You gave him this picture, and I know that there's a wonderful, in the biography, there's a picture of you presenting the painting to him. And it's actually a sister painting to the one that I held up earlier, because there are a lot of similarities. You see, this is called John Comes Home, and John is coming up in the wagon, and we see...
it represents an older brother who is coming back for the winter, for maybe Christmas, and his kid brother is running down and the dog's running down.
A very typical farm scene, and one that you saw every day, no doubt, growing up.
Oh, yes, sir.
Yes.
And I did the same thing. My father had to come after me, you see, up here. When I came back, I came down by railroads, you know, another day.
Do you know, Dale, tell us about the colors that you have in your paintings. Why you choose these?
I'm glad you asked me.
What do with color?
I'm glad you asked me. I'm very happy that you asked me. I had the Chamber of Commerce in Chicago one time, the head of it, call me up and say, we have a woman here from Kansas City that has a very interesting approach to color. And I think you'll be interested. May we send her over? I said, yes. Well, it'll be Maud Maple Miles. So Maud Maple Miles came in my studio on Michigan Avenue, and she had a little roll of something like this. She was about 70-some years of age. She sat at one side of my desk, and I sat at the other side, and she began to unroll this. And she said, Mr. Nichols, I made an interesting discovery. And I have found out a way to make color have the emotional quality of sound.
Have an emotional quality of sound.
And then she unrolled what she had there, and there was a piano keyboard of color.
Oh, yes,
A complete keyboard of the black and whites, but in color. I said, Mrs., what are you telling me? I am showing you that if you put a chord on this with your hand on the piano, I can do it in color and it'll be the same motion. I said, for heaven's sake.
Sounds a little tricky.
Maud Maple Miles put me into fine art.
And what do you try to do with color now in a painting like this?
This is painted in the key of C, and so is that.
Is that right? The key
Calling Maud Maple Miles of Kansas City.
Well, we're giving her credit. Do you know now, viewers who come into the art gallery see these beautiful, vivid colors of bright sky and bright white snow. And definitely your trade is a red barn. And I think that this picture is so typical of many of them that you have done in the art gallery, and typical of scenes that we're familiar with in Nebraska, and I wanted to share it with our viewers today. Fun to have you comment on that, to see where it came from. You know, you didn't always paint farm scenes. Thank you, Elaine.
Well, you see...
Your life changed a little bit, and you changed locations.
You see, there's the end of the hunt. The first thing I do with a painting is I put a line through the center of the canvas in chalk, like this and here, and then I do that again until I have a grid. Now you can see that grid if you get in an airplane and go 30,000 feet up above the, and you'll see the fields are all that way. But I didn't start me that way. But you see, all of my paintings have to fit in to those divisions. The barn has to be in fact, the end of the hunt has the middle of the barn right down the center of the canvas. Everything is very
balanced according to your grid.
It's mathematics all the way through. It has to be in order.
Yes. Well, now, Dale, this painting, which belongs to Chuck and Janet Jura and is on display, is totally different than the barn scenes that we saw earlier, because your life changed.
Well, you see...
where were you living when you...
I was living in Guatemala.
Guatemala.
But you see, I went down there when I see in the Life magazine, the old Life magazine, you know, a wonderful story on Tikal, which was being restored by the University of Pennsylvania. And they were taking and cleaning out all those big monuments, because the rainforest and the trees had covered them.
Would it be ancient ruins from Indians that lived in that area?
Far back as 300 B.C.
And someone was going to clean those.
And they were that was a project, you see, of the university.
Sure.
So when I got down there, then I saw these carvings on stone. And then I found, of course, by putting a piece of cotton sheeting over it and tacking it just with a tape. Then I could take some of the same material that would be rubbed into to some paint and rub over the surface and get this. And then change the color according to flesh color and so forth.
You actually then used a cloth over the ruins and did a rubbing technique. This is a wonderful scrapbook that kind of takes us step by step. That takes us, that shows you doing some of these rubbings and how exciting they must have been.
There's the one now you see on the other. It's covering the big stone in the forest. And this is the result over here on this side.
Sure. Now what's unique about this is that no longer can people go to this area and touch the ruins.
No, they have men with machine guns. You see, what happened is that somebody discovered that if they could get and break up one of these big stones and then get it across the river into Mexico and then take it across and sneak it into the United States, then they could put it back together again and get about $200,000 worth of stone.
So people are trying to dismantle them.
They were getting in there and stealing away the precious things that belonged to Guatemala.
Right.
So they put guys with, you don't go in there anymore.
No. Well, I'm glad that you were able to go when you could.
Yes,
this painting is dated 1979. It's not a painting. You actually called a metograph.
I call them metagraphs because when I was with the Harvard group in one of these at Ceibal, and they were a little bit, they didn't like me being there working on it and taking that sort of thing. So somebody asked me what I called my art. And I said, I call them metagraphs. Well, we call them, they said at Harvard, we call them rubbings.
Rubbings,
Why don't you call them rubbings? I said, because a rubbing is a Swedish massage. And then they all got angry.
Sure. Well, actually, we're calling them metagraphs, and that's how they are labeled here in the art gallery.
Metograph is correct. You see, metamorphosis, a proposition like a butterfly, you see, that turns in from a there's that proposition going on. All right, I put a piece of cloth over a stone, and I make it into that proposition of making one into an
art piece.
Sure. I have born, then you might say, something that's from another thing.
Yes, I think that's wonderful. And there are several examples of metagraphs hanging in the art gallery in this exhibit this month, as well as paintings that were done of Guatemala natives and watercolors of some of the ruins. So we get to see a sample of your life when you live there, which is wonderful. You didn't stay in Guatemala.
No, but I spent a lot of time in the rainforest, and of course I had to watch out for fer-de-lance. A fer-de-lance is an 8-foot snake, and if it bites you, have just time enough to say ouch. It's deadly.
You die.
Absolutely deadly.
Well, now you also, from Guatemala, I know you traveled different places and have lived all around, but Alaska was where you were most recently. And I think we could see this one. This is a beautiful painting.
Yes, that's the inner passage when you go by ship from Seattle. You'll go past this. That was made in a sketch from the ship as we went slowly around. There was a young fellow watching me while I did that. Oh, I'd say probably he might have been 18 years old. And when I stopped in my sketching, I was just making a quick copy of something, and stood back and looked at it. He said, "Beg your pardon, sir." I said, "Yes." "You know, you work a lot like Dale Nichols."
That must have been quite an honor for you to know.
When I told him I was Dale Nichols, the fellow almost fell overboard.
This painting currently belongs to the Miller Paine, I believe. They have several paintings that are on display in the art gallery, and several of them are for sale. This, as well as some others, were held part of an auction a year ago at this time, and these are some paintings that actually didn't sell. I don't think the auction was advertised too well. We didn't always know who you were, and these are beautiful paintings to have. And the fact that it represents your life in Alaska is especially nice for us. I wanted to re-emphasize to our viewers, too, that there are about 43 pieces of artwork hanging in the art gallery, and this display is called a Retrospective Art Exhibit of Dale Nichols, and it will be on display until the end of October, the 29th. And really, we very rarely, and we never have before in the art gallery, had so many paintings by one artist. And they really are artwork from your lifetime. One was completed last July, and the earliest were completed when you were about 12 years old. So it's a life story of a man who's sitting right here, and I do urge you to come see that.
Well, it was the best exhibition I've ever had in my life, and that's not
that's great.
Stretching at all.
It's an honor for us to have.
And it started, of course, you see, in David City. But it was a little interrupted there because the bank had to keep on with their banking.
Sure. Dale is
But here,
referring to the fact, let me
this is
tell our
terrific.
viewers here that this particular exhibit was on display at the First Tier Bank in David City just before it came here. So that's what you were talking about, because regular bank business had to be conducted.
Oh yes, they couldn't stop their regular banking, so the walls were not quite as free. As this is like a big gallery here.
Well, we appreciate you both areas, and it's so nice to have it. There is one last painting I do want to share with you. Dale, this particular painting belongs to the David City Public Schools, and there are two other paintings, I believe, that are owned by the public schools in the exhibit. And I wanted to include it in front of the camera today because the children who come to visit this exhibit are so enthralled by this painting. It's called the Faces of Lincoln, and they do look at it, and it's a real test. Who can see the three faces of President Lincoln in this painting?
Yes.
Why did you choose to paint them this way?
Well, actually, it was when I was in Illinois, and they were having some kind of a proposition having to do with Lincoln. In that city that he had lived in as a lawyer. I have it on my tip of my tongue. It's at the edge of the state. Prince starts with an S or something. I can't quite pull it up. Anyway, it was Lincoln's youth as a lawyer. Before he got into politics and got into the other. So what I had to do was cover you see, he was born in a log cabin, and he worked in the fields, and he built a lot of the wooden type of fences they had. And so he was not only the Lincoln we read about so much as he was, you might say, right into the forest and right into the trees and right into the earth. He was a part of that part of the sea. So that was shown. And then of course they had the little statements that I'd made about it. So that's why Lincoln is in the sky, and he's also in the trees and the forest.
And
he's down below.
Right there are three faces of Lincoln.
Oh yes.
Such fun for the children to find.
He was just not a man who became a famous person. He was a part of the soil and a part of the thing, absolutely part of it.
This painting that's a wonderful way of describing it then, and depicting it. Thank you, Elaine, for bringing this. Dale is going to demonstrate some of his artwork for us here in just a second, but before you stand and get started into that, I want to repeat for our viewers the exhibit and tell you about some things that are on sale here in the exhibit. The exhibit again it's on display now, thanks Elaine, and it will be on display until October 29th. And the gallery hours are weekdays from 1 until 4. That's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and also Thursday nights from 6 until 9. And we're also open Saturday morning from 10 to 1:30. Not open on Sunday, I'm afraid. So I hope that you will make a point of coming down. And children, if you're listening, please come. You will enjoy seeing a man's work over the lifetime and seeing fun things that he painted. There's a cute one that kids like about the chicken that's about to be caught for dinner. And grandparents and grandfathers, mothers and fathers would enjoy seeing this exhibit. There's something here for all of your family. When you leave, you can buy one of these commemorative posters that is for sale. It's very typical of Dale's work, and this is selling for $10 if Dale has signed it, $7.50 if he hasn't signed it. We also have some stationery on sale. I have a little package of it here. And that is, you get a package of one of Dale's paintings, thank you, Elaine, you get the 10 copies of the stationery.
Oh, that's fine. I didn't know about that.
Right. And it sells for $3. And this particular painting is on display in the art gallery, so it's fun to be able to see.
You've already sold one to me.
Well, good. That's great.
Yes, that's very unusual that you can find that many pictures, 10 of them reproduced in color.
It's black and white.
Oh, black and white. Well, that's all right.
And then the last thing we have for sale, and Elaine Norton and Bob Troutwine did very hard and very excellent work in putting this catalog together. together.
Yes.
As far as we know, it is the latest research on and most updated documents on Dale Nichols to collect pictures of his paintings and to list all of the known paintings in the back. And sometimes we have known the owners and sometimes not, but as far as we know, it's the most complete list of all of your paintings. Over a course of a man's lifetime, you lose paintings. You're not sure who bought them or who inherited them. And so a little booklet like this, seemingly so innocent, is really quite a valuable piece of information. And there are comments in here that Dale makes along the way. And there's a wonderful introduction that was done by Dr. Robert Spence, Art Department, University of Nebraska, that talks about your work and about your place in history of art. So this is for sale also, and we hope that you'll come visit and take a bit of these memorabilia with you when you leave.
The one thing I liked about this too is UNICEF of the United Nations. That came out of just a clear blue sky. I got a letter from, and they wanted to know if I would give them permission to reproduce the painting they have, you see, as a Christmas card.
Yes,
I had the copyright, you see. So I wrote immediately and told them I was deeply honored. So it came out by the United Nations, went throughout the world in UNICEF.
Your painting.
And it's now, of course, here on display.
Yes. And you know, that reminds me too, Dale, there are some wonderful memorabilia that are throughout the gallery that any of us can look at. They're playing cards and trays and beautiful plates that you painted. So we get to see all of the type of artwork that you did.
Oh, I think...
Dale, before we get into another story, I think we're running short on time. I want you to paint for us.
This won't be a story.
Okay.
When I was down at the University of Illinois, a newspaper wrote an article that said, after all, he's just a commercial artist.
Oh.
All right. I stood up in front of about 2,000 people as an introduction, you might say, to that new wonderful thing that had been appointed to do. I told them, you've probably read in the paper about I'm a commercial artist. And they looked at each other. I said, I'm not only a commercial artist, I'm going to return and remain a commercial artist. And I can tell you one simple reason why. If it hadn't been for a commercial artist and a copywriter and an advertising proposition, the United States would not have gotten anywhere. And Thomas Edison's inventions wouldn't have gone anywhere without a commercial artist and an advertising agent. So I am not going to ever stop being one. The newspaper they made a mistake. They're thinking it was a sin. It's not a sin to help my country.
Right. And I think that is so true. We hear artists say that today, that they make beautiful paintings, but someone has to share those, mass produce them in some way to get the message out, to get the image out to people.
I did one thing more. I said, I will not make a painting for an advertiser that cannot be taken after that's used and put in a museum.
Oh, yes.
If it's a Thomas Edison invention, it's got to be good enough for a museum, and I will not make a painting just because there's money in it for me, unless it can be put in a museum afterwards.
Wonderful. Well, now, you're about to do a painting for us. Now, it may not end up in a museum, but we want you to...
It'll be good for it, in short, for about 3 times what you pay.
It's such a rare opportunity that we can watch you make a painting, and you're going to do that right now in front of the camera. Would you like to just stand up and get started right here, Dave?
Yes. I'm going to make a painting, you see. I have to use some few mountains, so I'll probably use a little Nebraska scene. And I'll do it in probably 15 minutes.
All right. Well, you may go ahead and get started, and if you need me, I'm just sitting
I did it one time up in Alaska, and a man walked up to me. I did it for the seniors. A man walked up to me, he said, I'm not one of the seniors here. I live up the road. But do you ever sell these things? I said, well, usually what I do is maybe put a frame on them and a little more, a better frame, that sort of thing. Yes, I would usually sell them. Now, all the time I was talking to this fellow, there was an automobile salesman that was one of the seniors. And he'd sold automobiles, and he was listening to all this. So he said, well, how much do you usually get for them? I said, $20. He said, I'll give you a check right now. I said, okay. He wrote out a check for $20, handed it to me. He took the picture. My automobile salesman friend came up and said, do you know what you did? I said, yes, I made a picture in 20 minutes. And I sold it for $20. He said, you made $1 a minute.
Pretty good.
What I have to do is push buttons, you might say. What The biggest and most important thing in any kind of a picture is sunlight. Well, heliotropic, according to scientists, we're oriented to the sun just exactly like a moth is oriented to a flame. The same proposition. We're oriented to sunlight, and so I have to do this thing here entirely by keeping my mind on I have to have the light, the most important part. Otherwise, it will not do what I want it to do. It may be a picture of something like going up the Internet Passage, you might say, to go to Alaska. But the first thing I have to do, and sometimes I have somebody in the audience, I'll ask them to make a moving line, just like that, and then they go and sit down. Now, if you were sitting there, you'd be able to see what happens. Then I take some sort of a light blue, and I follow that line. It's just a line now, nothing at all. But you're going to see magic now. Is that, may I have the frame?
Oh, it's right down here. At your
Oh. Now you see mountains with the light the most important, and then some light in the sky. But that's only the beginning. I want to now put in a little bit of a direction of light. Put a few clouds in the sky. And have the sun showing a little bit. And then range of the light. Separate the area here and put these back by just putting a little light in front of them. And then since the light's over here, put a shadow to make this into now a cliff. And then, of course, remembering that water has no color, so it reflects the sky. And since the water is a little darker, I'll put a little darker blue. And I'll have up here just a little waterfall coming down. And then there'll be some waves. You see, I can't see this picture the way you see it. And I don't even paint pictures with the canvas upside or right side up. Usually I turn a picture upside down and finish it by having it upside down, because it's the feeling that I want. And I always tell people who are watching do this that when I do this next move, because the light is striking across the surface of the water, I will have it reflected, and it'll almost knock you out of your chairs. Just one simple reflection of the water. And since there's no life in this, I'll put a seagull in here. Now then, we have a little part of the earth here showing up. So I'll have an earthy color. With a slight little highlight where the light will strike. I'll take the bird out now because I don't want the bird there anymore. Because what I want now Now I want a man standing here, and I will have him I'll put him in silhouette, because all I have to do is just to show him as a man with shoulders. And he's actually going to be pulling a boat up. So I'll brace him here a little bit with his feet up on the cliff, with his two hands down like that. And then he'll be casting a shadow. And of course the water, or the cliff, will be like this. His boat will be, now he's got a rope hanging down like this. So the boat will be here. With a little reflection of it in the water. And a little bit of highlight, of course, on the back of the boat. And he will be wearing a red coat. So now we can put that over his silhouette. And you will have sort of blue trousers on. It'll be showing a little bit. And you'll have a black hat. And of course up here there'll be some trees. Casting shadows. Now you can see this, you see, I can't. I'm not standing like this, you know, with one hand like that, you know. But I'd like to have it now, of course, more than one seagull. So I'll put one seagull here. And maybe a couple of others small, like this. And since the trees will capture a little bit of sunlight, there'll be just a few. And of course, fireweed is very beautiful in Alaska, so I'll show some of those weeds. And they're called fireweed because they have a very beautiful red flower. Now, you see, I'm taking advantage of these because I want to have your mind oriented to sunlight. So by having the flowers struck by the light, I have then a beautiful feeling of pink light. And then a little touch more of this, of light underneath the cloud.
Dale, are we nearing the end of the painting? We have about 2 minutes to kind of wrap up things here. I think that's just miraculous to see that take place in front of us like that. And so great of an opportunity for our own children to be able to see an artist at work and to produce something so nice. That's great. And you, that's great. Show the camera there. That is wonderful. That's fun. That's, they can see it beautifully. That's exciting.
How long did it take to make it?
Not very long, just a short time. Dale, you can just stand there for a moment if you would. I wanted to review for our listeners that Dale and his retrospective art exhibit is on display now through the end of October. That's October 29th. So please come visit us at the Columbus Art Gallery, located in the lower level of the Columbus City Library, and see an entire lifetime of paintings. And thank you.